there's a lot going on in the world these days, and there are a lot of people really interested in growing their own food. So we want to, show you how to easily grow some quick and tasty and delicious food anywhere and everywhere. So not everybody has a big plot of land to grow in, but most people have a container of some type or another. And believe it or not, you can actually grow a good amount of food in some small spaces. But there are some tips that can kind of help you maximize the use of this space and make sure you are actually reaping a crop, even though you don't have a lot of room to grow. So some things that you do want to think about ahead of time are using proper containers. So one thing that is really, really important is having some drainage. So making sure that there are holes in the bottom of whatever it is that you're using. Most pots will sort of come that way. But if you are using something that you're recycling, like a yogurt container or, an old rubber boot, you can be pretty creative, but no matter what, you do want to make sure you have some holes so that the water can drain through. Otherwise, you can run into some problems with rotting. So yeah, you can use varying size containers. I would usually suggest using a larger container if you have it, because it's going to give the plants more room to grow and a little bit more space for you to kind of play around with what it is that you're able to grow. So another thing that is really important is soil. So when you're growing in a pot, you do really want to have a loose, kind of nice, compact, or not compact, but nice and fluffy. Usually contains a little bit of peat moss and these little styrofoam looking things called vermiculite. Because in a pot, you're going to want to make sure there's a lot of airflow. You don't usually have as many of the really nice insects that are in the garden and worms that are helping kind of move the soil. So you want airflow and water flow to go through it. But it is also important to think about adding some food. So here, this nice dark black soil that I have is worm castings. Really great, if you can come across something like that, but any kind of compost will be very useful. And you do want to mix it both together and make sure that you have a nice blend of food and sort of nice fluffy peat moss. So fill up your containers, and depending on what you're going to be planting, you can do this in different ways. So if you're just going to be planting from seed, fill it right up to the top. But if you're going to be needing a little room for plants, you can leave a little bit of space for that as well. So as you can sort of see from behind me, we're kind of in one of those very first beautiful, you can feel spring in the air days, beautiful blue skies, the buds are starting to pop on the trees. But we still have some really cold nights, so we're not quite at the time of year, at least here in Peterborough, Ontario, where we're planting sensitive crops like your basil or your tomato. So what we're going to do is plant some spring crops today, and things that, as long as the nights stay a little warmer than they have, could go outside, but certainly in really urban centers or even in a protected area, you can start planting these things. So one of the really cold hardiest things that we have is kale. So I did start this kale maybe about 3 weeks ago in my greenhouse. It's still pretty tiny, but that's okay. It's going to grow quite fast. You could also start kale from seed directly into the container, but sometimes it's nice to have a few starts. Makes you feel like you're already sort of well along in the growing season. So you can just sort of carefully pull these out all the way from the bottom. Try to get as much of the root as you possibly can. Nice, pretty looking kale seeds. And then what we're going to do is put it into the soil and sort of put it so that only the nice little top leaves are sticking out, the ones that we'd want to eat. We don't want to bury it too deep, but we want to make sure that it's going to have a lot of room to grow a nice deep root structure. So you don't really want to overflow your containers, because a lot of these things are going to grow quite a bit bigger, and it's actually better to give things more room to grow than to shove a lot of things into one container, because they'll all kind of suffer. So especially if you're dealing with a small space, that can be difficult because you want to try to grow as much as possible, but you do want to give them space to grow. So another really great, fairly cold, hardy crop is lettuce. Really nice right now. Many of us are maybe having trouble going to the grocery store or getting fresh food. So having some really fresh, delicious lettuce to eat right now is a real joy. So again, you just pull out. You can loosen the sort of bottom. Pull as much of the full root out as you can. Now, there are a couple different lettuce seedlings in here. So so I'm actually going to pull them apart because, again, we do want them to have room to grow. You're not going to break them unless you're really, really rough. They are kind of hardy. So again, you just want to put, one or maybe two, give them some room to grow. So seedlings, really nice because you're sort of well on your way and you're thinking, okay, I'm going to start to be able to eat some of this food. But you can also fill in with seeds. So, you could grow kale directly from seed. It's very fast growing. You're only waiting to eat the leaves. So continue to sow it throughout the season. Kale does grow really great in pots, so it's very healthy, very delicious, and it will last sort of throughout the entire season. You can also grow a few other smaller sort of things like peas. So peas are very, very cold hardy. These ones are from a really great seed company called True Love Seeds. Peas will climb. So a good thing to think about when you're growing containers is to maximize space. So if you have some lower leaves like this, you can also plant something that's going to climb up and kind of use different horizontal and vertical space. So you can just open your lovely seed pack. These nice, beautiful peas. Peas can grow in the ground right now too, in late April, early May is a great time to plant them directly outdoors here in Ontario, but in pots is great too. So when you're planting seeds, you want to sort of plant them twice as deep as they are big. So these ones are a fairly good size. We're going to make a little divot. And then again, not too many. We don't want to overcrowd them. If it's older seed and you're not sure how viable they are, you can plant a few extra, but this is new seed and I'm fairly confident it's all going to sprout. So just cover that up and plant them nicely in there. And they should sprout in about 7 to 10 days, depending on what type of seed you're growing. Some other things that are great to grow in pots, again, are more greens like spinach, some bright colored fun Swiss chard. And then smaller things like radishes are also really great. They're fast growing, they don't take up a lot of space, and you can kind of continually keep planting them throughout the season. You could, in a bit of a bigger pot, think about growing things like a cherry tomato or even a zucchini and beans. Those are all very cold sensitive though, so we're not going to get to planting those quite yet. That'll be a little bit until maybe the end of May, depending on how the season goes. So we have our beautiful pot here. We got some greens growing, some pea seeds. We want to make sure it gives it a really good drink of water. And pots do tend to dry out a little faster than your garden might. So remember to continually water it. And if you're going to be growing it throughout the season, it will probably need another layer of food. You can just top dress the compost on top of it. Some people might use fish emulsion, but you want the food to be continually producing, so you want to be able to continually feed it at the same time. And again, because it's not out in the ground, it may not have access to some of those sort of natural foods. So feed it and water it regularly. And remember to eat the food. People sometimes feel, oh, I only have this little bit, I don't want to eat these lettuce leaves. But if you eat them, they're going to keep growing more. So don't be afraid to use your food. I do have this one was planted in a similar way several weeks ago, and you can see it already is getting quite large. There's lots of delicious pak choy and some lettuce and some baby kale that's growing in here, and it's really nice to have as a fresh addition to salads at this time of year. So yeah, I would say no matter where you are, no matter how much space you have, you can definitely grow some food. Not only is it nice to have access to this delicious, fresh, healthy food. I had a nice bowl of fresh salad greens last night. But it really is, it makes you feel good. It makes you feel happy to put your hands in the dirt and to be growing some food. So I would suggest everyone should try it and grow something, somewhere, anywhere you can.